Today we're going to take a look at what I think is probably the best entry-level microbrand diver I've ever seen. Now I think this review will be helpful for two kinds of people. One would be the person who's sort of looking for their first microbrand watch. They haven't really bought many before. And the second is going to be for those of you who are looking for their 18th Zelos watch, because that's all you guys collect. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Zelos Swordfish Titanium. Let's check it out. Hey everybody, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave, and today we're taking a look at the Zelos Swordfish Titanium. And I'm really excited to check out this watch. Zelos is a brand that I've been following for a long time. I've been watching lots of reviews and really been looking for an opportunity to feature one of their watches here on the channel. If you're not familiar with the Zelos, they are one of, I think, the biggest success stories in the microbrand industry. And they have kind of an interesting business model. What they typically do is they do kind of limited runs of their watches that often will sell out fairly quickly. They always release their watches at a lower price, and then eventually that price will jump up. So if you are interested in getting one of these watches, I definitely recommend that you pick it up early. Today we're taking a look at the 42mm version of the Swordfish. However, they released a 40mm just a couple of weeks ago, and I believe that sold completely out in 8 hours. So I got a feeling this one might sell out pretty quick as well. It hasn't been released on their site yet, so you've still got a chance to get your hands on it if you're watching this review when it comes out. So if you are interested in this watch, definitely recommend that you sign up for their newsletter so you can get alerts when it is released and get ready to pick it up quickly. And this very likely could be a watch you're going to be interested in picking up quickly. Now, before I go into the full review, I do want to thank Zelos for sending this watch in for review. It is one that I do get to keep after the review is done. However, I don't have an affiliate code or any financial incentive at all in talking about this watch. And I say that because it might sound like I'm gushing a little bit as I go through the rest of this review. Because frankly, I was pretty blown away with what they offer at this price range. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a full review of this watch. And then I also want to talk a little bit about titanium as a watch material, because this is the first titanium watch that I've experienced. And I think for a lot of people, the big question is going to be, do you really want a titanium watch? That's going to be one of the biggest, I think, determining factors in whether or not you want to buy this particular Zelos. So we'll talk a little bit about what the pros and cons of titanium are, because it's a pretty interesting material to use for a watch case. This watch also has really fantastic lume that looks amazing in the dark. It's a bi-color lume, so we'll be doing a full lume rundown. And this watch comes with some of the best extras that I've ever seen in a package. Again, really increasing, I think, the value of this watch at the price they're selling it for. They haven't actually released the final pricing on this, but they've said it's probably going to be around $370. So we'll kind of keep that in mind as we go through the review. But let's go ahead and take a look at the watch itself. Okay, so here is the Zelos Swordfish 42mm titanium watch. This is a 300-meter water resistance diver with a sapphire crystal. Inside you've got a Seiko NH35 movement, which is a great entry-level movement. I would expect to see a Seiko NH35 movement in a watch in this price range. I would not expect to see a full titanium watch with a ceramic bezel and lume of this quality and a clasp like they've included on this. So a lot of things in this watch that really punch above that price range, but the movement is very average, and I think that's one of the ways that they kept the cost down, and I really appreciate that. I like that about it. I would rather have an entry-level Seiko movement with the titanium and the ceramic and all those other bonuses rather than having just an upgraded movement and having the other components and properties of the watch have to be more average because of that. This watch is 14 millimeters thick, so a little bit on the chunky side, but only 47 millimeters lug to lug, so it wears really compactly on the wrist. Feels great because that titanium is so light. It just really molds to your wrist well. It has a really good lug design. I feel like that kind of just hugs your wrist really well. And the bracelet is really comfortable also. This is a full titanium bracelet, and the links are fairly small, so there's a lot of articulation and a lot of freedom of movement on that bracelet. One of the things I really love about this watch is that Zelos has really created kind of their own design language. You can definitely recognize a Zelos watch when you see it, when you see the other ones across their collection. Often they'll use these kind of really thick hands with this interesting lines going through them, something that's fairly unique to them. The Swordfish is also a sandwich dial watch, so you can see that the indices are cut out, revealing a lumed layer underneath. And we'll get into a lume shot in a minute here, but this actually uses two different colors of lume. So it uses kind of that patinaed lume, which really I think is a color choice here. They're not trying to go for an antique look. It's just a really nice muted color that goes well with the black. They call it a black sand dial. You can see that that's a textured dial as well, which is really well done, sort of sand texture too. Now, a lot of times with this sort of patinaed lume look, you have to sacrifice lume brightness, and that was one thing I was a little bit worried about. But this is still one of the brightest watches I've tested, so we'll get into that lume test a little bit later on. I think Zelos's design is a very modern design, almost futuristic in a sense. The lines that they've given and the angles that this has and just how clean everything is, it really is kind of a hyper modern dive watch style, which is really cool. So many micro brands are going for the vintage look, the classic look. They're really drawing their inspiration from the past and current models. I feel like Zelos is more forward looking in a lot of what they do, which is just a really fresh and interesting design. It may not be for everybody, but I think it is a really appealing design, and I think it does appeal to a lot of people. One of my favorite features of the design is the way that they did the date. So you've got a 6 o'clock date there and a cutout, which is fairly standard. But what they've managed to do is they've managed to also include a small cutout underneath it, so you're still getting a marker at 6 o'clock. Now, a lot of watches, when they use a date, the date will completely replace one of the markers, whether it's 3 or 6. Which often can leave the watch, throwing the symmetry off a little bit, where you have kind of a missing marker, and that's especially noticeable in the dark if you've got a dive watch. If there's a missing segment of lume, like if this did not have that at 6 o'clock, when this watch goes dark, you would just have a black spot where the 6 o'clock marker is, and it would be more difficult to read the time. However, because it has that sort of shortened marker down there, you still get a nice bright glow at the 6 o'clock position in the dark. So really appreciate that aspect of it. The bezel is really easy to grip. You can kind of see these really deep cutouts that are kind of grooved in there, almost like it's a gear shape. So you can get a really firm grip on it fairly easily. The action is very solid. This is a watch that you can definitely feel the clicks on it. It's a 120 click unidirectional bezel. I feel like it's a little bit too tight though. I would have preferred a little bit looser so that it's easier to turn. With dry hands, it's no problem turning it, but I found that when my hands get wet, so if you're taking this in the water, it gets really difficult to actually use the bezel because of the stiffness on it. Hopefully that's something that will loosen up in time. The bezel insert itself is ceramic and it's brushed and also fully lumed. It looks great. Another interesting design choice that Zelos has is this sort of beveled or faceted inner ring inside the bezel insert. So it kind of looks like, like a screw or something like that. And yeah, just another interesting design touch that they've gone with there. Case finishing is almost entirely brushed, which I think is a good choice with titanium. You are getting a little bit of polishing on the top of these lugs, and you can kind of see the angle sort of turns inward at that. You get this sort of inward angled chamfered edge, which is another just really interesting touch as the bracelet comes up to meet the head of the watch. Nice angled crown guards as well. So this does the case design reminds me similarly to the Seiko Samurai a little bit. It is have a lot of significant differences, but that kind of really angular design does share some similarities to that. Getting a solid case back with the swordfish engraved on it, nice and simple. And this clasp is one of my favorite things about the watch. This is one of the best engineered clasps I've ever seen. And that was actually a challenge with the previous iteration of the swordfish. There was a problem with the previous clasp. They had to replace it. The previous clasp was too short, and so it was difficult to get your hand in. I have fairly large hands, and I have no problem getting this on, so you don't have to worry about that at all as far as the size goes. But what I really like about this clasp is that it has its own tool-free micro adjust in it. So you can see that little tab there. You can pull that and actually slide the resize the bracelet on the fly, giving you, you know, the equivalent of maybe a link and a half, adding or removing. So really cool feature there. I have one other watch that has a clasp similar to this. The Swiss watch company diver that I have also has a clasp like this. And just having the ability to adjust the size of your metal bracelet throughout the day is just a real game changer. It's a feature I would like to have on all of my braceleted watches. But it's a premium feature. It's something you don't normally see in watches in the sub $500 price range. It's more commonly associated with luxury watches and things like that, or is like an aftermarket add-on. And this is one of the best implementations of this that I've seen. It works really well. It's very sleek. It doesn't add any bulk to the watch either. You know, I'm really amazed that they were able to engineer something that small into this kind of a package. So really cool feature there. The rest of the clasp is just really well engineered. Great steel milled clasp. And the action is really good as well. Just snaps securely into place. Double pushers there. It's a really impressive clasp. On top of it, it's just a beautiful clasp. I mean, just the way that they've integrated their logo and the brushing into there, it just looks great as well. The last thing I want to point out here, these are screw links, so these are not push pins. Again, this is another feature I almost never see on a watch under $500. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a watch under $500 give you, you know, screw links like this. So you normally get the push pins. So you do need a really small screwdriver in order to adjust the links. Like I have like an eyeglass screwdriver, and that was actually too big. I had to go out and find one slightly smaller than that. But that makes it much easier to add and remove links and resize the bracelet. You just need that little screwdriver and you can do it. So another great feature on there. So overall, just really incredible value for what you're getting. Let's talk a little bit about titanium, because again, I think that's one of the most interesting aspects of this watch, and that is sort of the distinguishing feature of this particular version of the Swordfish. So what are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? The biggest benefit to titanium is the lightness. Okay, so this is a material that is incredibly light, and it's almost shockingly so. If you haven't ever picked up a titanium watch before, it's a really almost disconcerting feeling the first time you pick up a full titanium watch with a full titanium bracelet, because it feels cheap. It feels like you're picking up a watch that's got like a cheap, rattly, hollow link bracelet with a quartz movement inside and lots of empty space in the case. It's just a weird feeling, but it's not cheap and it's not flimsy by any means. Titanium is actually stronger than stainless steel. So you're getting a material that is stronger than stainless steel and yet significantly lighter, and that makes it wear incredibly comfortably. This is one of the most comfortable metal bracelet watches that I've ever worn. I think part of it is that because the titanium is such a light material, it's less top heavy as well, so it just kind of almost just sticks to your wrist. It just sort of sits in place. It doesn't flop around as easily as a full stainless steel watch does. And just everything about it is just really comfortable. Another really interesting thing about it is that it does kind of patina. It has a bit of an oxidizing layer that it develops over it that actually kind of protects the material and, again, helps with the hypoallergenic properties of it. Okay, which does lead to some of the things that people don't like about titanium, and that is the look of titanium. So titanium, compared to stainless steel, it's a duller, darker gray color. It's more difficult to get really shiny, polished edges, and particularly to keep that, it tends to have more of a matte look after a while as it starts to oxidize. And another interesting thing is that it is softer than stainless steel. So it tends to scratch more easily. Particularly this one. This is made out of grade 2's titanium steel, which is the softer of the two grades. There's grade 5, which is more scratch resistant. A lot of companies will also put a scratch resistant coating on to further help mitigate that aspect of the titanium. This does not have a scratch resistant coating, so I do expect that this watch will pick up scratches more easily. But that brings up some other interesting properties, because I've been doing some research on this. This is my first titanium watch, so you guys down below correct me if I'm missaying this. But from the research I've done, it seems like even though it scratches more easily, because it does oxidize, a lot of times titanium is kind of self-healing in a way. That layer will sort of refresh itself. It'll scratch easier, but then after a while it'll sort of just build up that layer again. And some of those scratches will tend to go away. If it's a deep scratch, it's not going to do it. The other thing is because it's a softer metal and because it's got that layer on on it. It's supposed to be easier to kind of correct yourself. There's some tips and tricks online about, you know, brushing it and restoring a brushed finish to it. So maybe after a couple years, I might try that with this watch and see how that works. But yeah, just a really interesting material, but maybe do a little bit of research on that and see if you really want a titanium watch. For me, I think it's just a great material for a dive watch. It's really tough. The other thing is that it's really corrosion resistant, so even more so than stainless steel. So particularly if you're going into salt water a lot, it's just the perfect material for a functional dive watch. The main drawbacks seem to be cosmetic. So yeah, that's titanium for you. All right, let's check out the Lume. The Swordfish After Dark looks absolutely incredible. They've done an amazing job with the Lume in doing a kind of two-tone Lume layout. You're getting C3 green Lume on most of the hands, markers, and bezel. And then the chapter ring and the second hand are lumed in blue using BGW9. The Lume is incredibly bright and is easily visible after dark. And in the dark, this is one of the coolest looking dive watches I've ever seen. But exactly how bright is it? Let's go ahead and do a full Lume time lapse and compare it against some other watches in my collection. This time we're going to put it up against the Seiko Samurai, the Axios Ironclad, which is my current Lume champion, and then to kind of give a baseline, I've also put in the Bronze Aquatico Sea Star, which has kind of like average level Lume. These other watches in there are more on the exceptional side. One thing that you'll notice is that the Lume on the bezel does tend to fade fairly quickly. However, the main 12 o'clock mark hangs on there much longer, enabling it still a lot of usefulness in the dark. In this case, the Zelos came in third place, and I think that a lot of that might have to do with the kind of choice of Lume color, where they were using that sort of patina brownish colored Lume. I think some of the other models use a white colored paint, which tends to be a little bit brighter, so depending on the model you get, you may or may not have brighter ones. Either way, this definitely puts it pretty comparable to Seiko, if it's not quite as bright, but pretty close, which gives you a pretty good idea of how long it's going to last. Okay, finally, let's take a look at the extras that they give you, which are really cool. In addition to the watch itself, you're also getting a really nice Horween leather strap, a leather watch roll that can hold 4 watches pretty easily, metal warranty card, so good for 1-year warranty, which is great to have, and then a pretty cool wood box that you can use to store the watch itself or put other things in. The box is surprisingly well made. And then you can call an extra, but this clasp that they've included with the micro adjust system is just really amazing. We've been over this before. But I have never seen a clasp like this on a watch at this price range. So the clasp, the strap, and the watch roll in particular, these are all things that oftentimes you can buy as add-ons to watches. They'll cost extra. And you know, you'd probably be looking at roughly around $50 for each of those. To get a leather watch roll of this quality, you know, you could easily spend $50 on that. This strap definitely, I think, would be about $50 retail for a Horween leather strap of this quality. And then that clasp probably going to add another $50 to the cost. So I almost feel like you're getting like an extra $150 worth of value thrown into this, which really, again, makes it unheard of to find all of this at this $370 price range. Let's go ahead and take a look at that strap. So this is kind of a wax finish, but the leather just feels so great. It's just a really supple, smooth, really pleasant leather. It is thick. It's a double layer piece of leather there. So it's finished on both the underside and the top side. You can see it does have the Horween branding there. The only Zelos branding is on the underside of this one. Like, I mean, seriously, this is probably now one of the best leather straps that I own. It does have quick release pins, and the bracelet itself actually also has quick release. So that's another feature that you don't see very often on there. Now, having quick release makes it very easy to remove the bracelet. Reinstalling a bracelet is still tricky even with the quick release pins. I don't know if it's necessarily faster this way with the quick release than it would be with the watch tool, but you don't need a tool to put the bracelet on and off. So this is a really nice look for the watch. You know, it's definitely a dive watch, and so putting it on a leather strap is a little bit odd, but I think it looks really cool, and I think it still matches the watch well. And so if you're into leather on your dive watches, this is a great option for it. So really impressed that they give you this high quality of a strap for free. I mean, oftentimes you'll see watch companies throw in like a nylon NATO strap, which is, like a little $10 extra. But to throw in an actual Horween leather strap like this is pretty crazy. So really impressed with that and really appreciate that. All right, finally, let's wrap all this up and talk about the pros and cons of the Zelos Swordfish Titanium Edition. On the pro side, you're getting a watch that is just a really fantastic value, full titanium case and bracelet, sapphire crystal, amazing lume, Seiko NH35 movement, free additional Horween strap and leather watch roll, and a fresh modern design that really has a look of its own. Getting all of that for $370 is pretty crazy. And if you are interested in getting this watch, I do recommend that you get ready to purchase it quickly because it will probably sell out soon. Particularly these lower price Zelos models, these sort of entry-level ones, they tend to really sell fast. And I don't think this one's going to be any exception to that rule. Okay, but what about the drawbacks? What are some of the negatives of this watch? Overall, they're fairly minor, the things that I've encountered. First is the bezel action. To me, it's a little bit too stiff, particularly when I have wet hands. I find it really difficult to use. When my hands are dry, it's pretty easy to grab and turn, but I would have liked the action to be a little bit smoother, a little bit easier to turn. But it is a very solid bezel action, not a lot of back play, so it's got that going for it. Second thing is that the date window seems to be a little bit sunk in, deeper than I normally see, making it sometimes difficult to read at certain angles. There can be some shadows cast over the date wheel, and that's probably just a consequence of doing a sandwich dial watch that has that kind of additional layer in the dial before you get down to the date. And the third con is a very minor one, and that was that there were a little bit of scratches on the backside of the bracelet, but as I've worn it, the backside of the bracelet has picked up even more scratches, and I think that's primarily just a function of the titanium as the back of the bracelet sort of rubs against the clasp when I put it down and things like that. Fortunately, I haven't had as many scratches on the front side what people see, but it has also picked up some scratches, again, because it's titanium, and that's just part of the nature of a titanium case and bracelet. The last one is the accuracy on the movement. Now, this is using a Seiko NH35 movement, so this isn't necessarily all Zelos' fault. The Seiko NH35 is a movement that's used in tons of different Microbrand watches, not just Zelos, but many of them do, and it has a reputation for being a reliable, long-lasting workhorse movement. However, the one in this particular watch is not running very accurately. It's running right around negative 20 seconds a day, which is just at the outer boundary of what Seiko classifies as sort of acceptable for this movement. So it is not running out of spec, but it's just barely running within spec. And I've seen a lot of Seiko NH35s that are running much better than that, but sometimes that's what you get. But all that said, if you're interested in picking up your first Microbrand watch, I think this is a great option. Or if you're just interested in a dive watch in general and you have around a $400 budget, I think this is definitely one you want to take a look at. Again, you kind of probably have to make your decision quickly because these tend to sell out, but it should be coming out in the next week sometime, so get ready for it. All that said, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what your experience with Zelos has been, if you've had any, or what you think of this particular model from Zelos. That will do it for today. Thanks for watching. See you later.